Hey everyone, it's Jessica, and today is the 8th edition of my 10 Days of Truth in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. Today I'm going to share a little bit about my anxiety and kind of what that looks like and how it kind of developed for me. I've been putting this video off because I don't really know how best to articulate and explain what it's like when I'm having an anxiety attack or when I'm experiencing, any level of anxiety, whether it's mild or severe. And I think that it's perhaps something that's a little bit harder to share with other people, especially people who might not have experienced anxiety themselves, because it's sort of this combination of mental and physical illness, and sometimes it can be really hard to even parse out which is which. So I'll do my best, and I probably will record another video tomorrow with a little bit more information and maybe try to illustrate a little better after I've thought about it a little bit more. But my anxiety started in, I think, 2013, so it's fairly recent for me. And it actually started when I was teaching. I was teaching fourth grade, and my class that year was really highly impacted. I'd moved from a suburban district to an urban district, and even though I had taught in other urban districts, just sort of an amalgam of factors all sort of came together, and I had 30 kids in a very small space, and pretty much every student had something going on in their world that was pretty intense. And so, that year I had, I think it was about 85% free and reduced lunch. I had 60%, I think, were second language learners. I had one or two kiddos who were newcomers from Mexico, so they had just arrived, and it was their and their family's first experience with school. I think I had about 5 kiddos who had IEPs, and one of my students actually had had a traumatic brain injury right before summer break the year before, so coming into my class was the first time that he was coming back to school after all of that. And so, I was trying to navigate with his family and with the staff, like what the process was for getting him on an IEP, because he didn't need one the year before. And then there was the whole transition of transitioning him back into school. He couldn't go to school all day, so he had reduced hours, and just trying really hard to get him the right services and make sure that he was getting the help he needed and that his family was getting what they needed. I also had, I think, about 18 of my kids were significantly below grade level, and most of them in reading and in math. I had kiddos who were, I was teaching fourth grade. I had kiddos who were reading on a, kindergarten, first, second grade level, same levels for math. And so that was really hard to try to differentiate for, all of their different needs. And then I also had 5 kids who were on ALPs, which are advanced learning plans, which means that they had been identified for some area of gifted and talented. So I also had high achieving kids, I had gifted kids, I had just like this whole gamut of kiddos. And then on top of that, just all of the struggles. And I had a lot of behavior stuff that year because a lot of my kids had really tough home lives. And when you don't have a stable environment at home and you have not been successful up until that point academically, it makes it really hard for you to engage in school. And especially when you've got kids who are so far below grade level, for them to even access the content and the standards that you're supposed to be teaching, that is really difficult for them. So that creates another whole layer of behavior issues, because if they can't read what it is that you're reading, or they can't understand the math that you're trying to do, or engage in the conversations about the social studies or science topics that you're having, then like they're going to be bored and they're not engaged and they're not going to feel successful, and it's not good. So in any event, that was the year that I learned what it was like to work 10.5-hour days without eating much more than like a granola bar, and, talking to the cops on my lunch break and making reports to, child welfare and human services, and just like running around my building as much as I could, trying to get the services for my kids that I knew they needed, trying to get them help as best as I could, and reaching out to interventionists and their previous teachers and other colleagues, like the special ed teacher, like how can I, help this student, or what can I do with this kiddo? They're really struggling in math. Like, can you help me find something that would be at their grade level? Just all of those things that I was doing. And it was a really intense year from day one. I mean, like on the first day of school, I had 30 kids sitting in front of me. I only had like 26 kids on my roster, and so I only had that many chairs. I didn't even have enough furniture for the kids to sit at on the first day of school. And someone stabbed someone else with a pencil. I think there was a biting incident on my first day of school. It was just like that first day of school was very typical of my whole year. And it's actually one of my favorite years of teaching. I love those babies with my whole heart, and I could not imagine, and I wouldn't change for the world, every single thing that we went through together, because we created the family in our classroom because we had to. It was like okay, guys, we got to figure this out. Like, we don't have any desks. What are we going to do? And, you're on top of each other and it's 90 degrees in our classroom and you don't have room to even like spread out your book and your paper, but we've got to figure this out. Like, we don't have a choice. And like biting and stabbing each other with pencils is not the way that we're going to figure it out. So what are we going to do instead? So in any event, I, learned a lot from that year and from those kids. And, the thing that I think really contributed to my anxiety is that I care so deeply about people in general, but particularly I have always been that kind of teacher who cares deeply about each and every one of my kids. And it was the first time that I was solely responsible for teaching all of these individual students who needed so much from me besides just being their teacher. And I think that that's the case no matter where you teach and what population you work with. But these kids in particular, I really had to learn how to be at times I was mom and dad and nurse and social worker and, even things like immigration and learning about new cultures and, being able to be really sensitive and respectful to the situations that were going on at home and, just all of the different sort of hats that you have to wear as a teacher. I feel like I had to wear a lot more of them, especially that year. And, even just being able to figure out the system myself so that I could then teach the parents and the families how to navigate that system and advocate for what their kids needed. Because I also saw a lot of these kids were not being, they weren't being served in the way they needed to. Their parents didn't know how to advocate for those things. So a lot of times it was, me advocating on one side and saying like, hey, I'm this kid teacher and I need them to have this service or I really want them to have this. But then on the back end, talking to the parents and saying, your child deserves this and here are your rights as a parent and here is what you are required to be provided if you want it, and I think that this is how you should go about doing it. And that's always kind of a tricky situation to be in as a teacher, because like you work for the system but then you're kind of trying to teach the families how to navigate and advocate within that system, and sometimes that means fighting against the system. It's all very complicated, but the thing that I didn't realize, and actually I just heard somebody say this year, and it just totally clicked for me. I heard some educators talking about how it's really important at their school that they and the educators they work with learn that it's their job to serve the kids, not to save the kids. And that really has stuck with me as a really valuable statement, and I wish that I had come across it a lot sooner. I don't think that I necessarily have internalized that statement yet, and were I to go back to the classroom tomorrow, that would be really, really hard for me to do. But I do believe it. I do believe that in order for us to have teaching be sustainable, especially when you're working in situations where you've got that many things on your plate as a teacher, I think that's really important that you recognize I can't save them all, but I can serve them all. But it's hard. It's hard when you're looking at these 8, 9, 10-year-olds sitting in front of you, and you know better than what they might be being provided, and what they deserve, and you see the brilliance and the beauty that is there before you, and you want to foster it, and you want to do everything that you can. And I'll always be that teacher who will die on that hill for my kids. So I think that that's something that I've come to terms with, the fact that I don't want to teach any other way, and maybe there's a different way to teach that still values all of those things that I think are important, and that you can give that much to your kids without it killing you. But at the same time, I don't want to phone it in, and if my kid needs a coat, I'm going to figure out how to get them a coat. And if I suspect that something is awry at home, I'm going to do everything that I can. And unfortunately, I had people around me saying well, there's nothing you can do. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me, right? Of course there's something I can do, because I'm the adult and they are the child. And if there's anybody in the situation who could say there's nothing I can do, it's the kid. It's not me. And so, I think that being a really passionate educator, it sometimes means that we put ourselves out there in those ways. And so anyway, all of that is to say, that is how my anxiety developed. And it's definitely, been different since leaving the classroom. But even though I developed anxiety from teaching, leaving teaching didn't take it away. And it's almost like that's how my body and my brain knows how to react to situations with anxiety now. And so it doesn't know how not to go there, if that makes sense. So I think that, it's something that I'll probably always have, but definitely, not being in the classroom every day has helped a great deal. And I can actually, go good periods of time without experiencing anxiety, which is really quite lovely. But then there are other times where, I'll be sitting in a meeting and all of a sudden I'll start to feel anxious. And, whereas there were times during that intense time, those couple of years in the classroom, it was, I think, more intense of like feeling nauseous or feeling like I was going to throw up, or really, really bad migraines and, with the blurry vision and all that kind of stuff, dizziness sometimes, all of those kinds of things are not as common now, which is great. There are a few symptoms that I have that are still super unpleasant. Not that there are any symptoms of anxiety that like are pleasant, because it's always just really sucky, but more common now is like a shortness of breath. That's one of the most common ones. It feels like I can't breathe and like I can't catch my breath. That one is really, really frustrating and really difficult, particularly because, you're trying to catch your breath, but you can't. And it feels kind of not silly, but like, it's just frustrating. It's like, really, I can't breathe. Like, come on, I know that I can breathe and everything's fine, but like you can't breathe. And then you start feeling stressed out about that and anxious about that. So that one's not super fun. The other one that I really dislike is it feels like my, like I'll be really cold. And so it's like my skin is really cold on the outside, but right underneath my skin, it feels like it's boiling hot. And it's just this really unpleasant physical feeling of like being cold and hot all at the same time. And sometimes that comes with like a racing heart, which is also not super awesome. And so it's just, it's most frustrating and bothersome, I guess, when those kinds of things are impeding just my day to day. If I'm sitting in a meeting and like I start feeling like I can't catch my breath, like that's frustrating. And the thing that bothers me about it too is that it takes my mind off of the task at hand, because you have all you can do to just sort of like keep yourself calm. And so instead of being able to engage in the conversation that's happening in front of you, you're trying to sort of keep up with the conversation as best you can and almost like fake it through the conversation. But really what your mind is mostly focused on is like trying to catch your breath or trying to stay calm, or like, you're fine, everything's fine. Like, or distracting yourself, because if there's something that's going on that's causing the anxiety, then it's like, okay, if I distract myself. So it's hard to attend and be present when, you're kind of like just expending all of that energy to just sort of exist. And the other thing that's frustrating about that for me is that a lot of times that means that I am not able to remember some of the stuff that happens. There was actually an incident a while back where I like could not remember at all. Like I remembered that the situation happened and there was like an exchanging of paperwork and whatnot. And so I remembered like, yes, that happened, but I had no recollection of like who took the papers and what was the conversation and what was the outcome of all of that. And I was asked like, hey, do you have those papers? And I like legitimately could not remember, did I even take them? Did I not take them? It really is like certain chunks of your memory are just sort of gone. And it's because I was having pretty bad anxiety at the time. And so instead of being able to be really present and remember, what had happened in that situation, I was so focused on just like existing and surviving and like, okay, I'm going to keep myself like standing on 2 feet here. It just like was so distracting that I wasn't able to remember after the fact like what had happened. And that happens fairly regularly, where there will be certain things, generally not that much, like big chunks that are missing, but a lot of times I'll be like, wait, we talked about this, but I can't remember what we decided, and how did we want to handle that? And that's just, that's not great, because it doesn't make you look super responsible or credible. And sometimes it can impact my work, or just when I am dealing with anxiety, and so it's keeping me from being able to get my work done, and then everything takes that much longer, and then I'm a perfectionist, so then when I have anxiety and I'm trying to get work done, then my perfectionism kind of kicks in on high gear, and then my brain starts telling me like, no, you need to do this over again, or this isn't good work, or like I'll just get super nitpicky and like perseverate over the same thing, rather than just being like, yep, it's good enough, and then like sending it off, or being done with it. So anyway, I think that's long enough for right now. I'll probably share some more tomorrow after I, keep thinking about some stuff and maybe be able to better illustrate some of those things. But, I thought it was important to at least start with like the anxiety origin story, and kind of, where that's at now, and then, maybe elaborate on that more tomorrow. So thanks for listening. Fingers crossed that I can get through the rest of this series. It is harder and harder every day to hit record and then to hit publish, but I think I'm learning a lot from this process, so I'm going to try to hang with it just a couple more days, and hopefully everybody had a really nice 3-day weekend. I'll talk with you all tomorrow.